over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer, and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television, as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
Some people think that they're thinking when they're not thinking at all. That's what we're going to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
Hi, I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and you may be one of those thinking people that think they're thinking when they're not thinking at all. I know that sounds like just a play on words, but it's more than the lyrics to a song by Morgan Cryer from the 1990s. It's actually a really common thing for people to believe what they've heard and what they've repeated to themselves over and over and over. These common phrases, these deeply held beliefs, they come up as an attitude. Go back and watch the last several episodes. We've talked in depth about how your meta-narrative becomes a story, and if you're not careful, that story drives your attitude. But today I want to talk about how the thinking process alone, that's a huge aspect of the who that you are. Now, a lot of people think, I want to go into leadership. And part of their mind, their brain, their subconscious, their own belief system says, I want to go into leadership because if I become a great leader, I'll become wealthy. If you ask people who are wealthy, most of them, especially the ultra wealthy, the 10, 11 figure wealthy, these days, it seems like 6 figures is just survivability, and 8 figures is, well, that's pretty impressive to some, but 9 figures. When you get into the 9 figures, now you've got something going on. And when you cross that 10-figure business, you're considered pretty successful. But most people who reach that point will tell you one thing that's very true: success is hard. Now, let me delineate 2 groups of thought on that. There are a lot of people that think, well, if I just win the lottery, gain an inheritance, write a book and sell 1 million copies, that's success and that ain't that hard. Well, it might put numbers in your bank account. It may add some zeros behind your net worth. But all of the studies have shown lottery winners, big game winners, most of them, they don't keep it long. In fact, I have friends, at least a half a dozen friends who have been in the NFL, played at the highest level, played in the biggest games. And they'll tell you NFL stands for not for long. Some of these people have made lots and lots of money and lost it as fast as they made it. And if you think that making that kind of money in a game like being in the NFL or the NBA or women's Olympic soccer isn't hard work, you've missed something. It's not just the discipline of getting up and going to the gym, of getting out there and slamming your body against somebody else's to make the shot, make the play, catch the ball, kick the ball, whatever. There's a lot more to it than that. There's the discipline off the field. There's the relationships that you have to build. So a lot of people think, well, I'm going to get really wealthy, and when I have a lot of money, life's going to be easier. No, because now that you got money, everybody wants your money. They're going to come after you for taxes. They're going to make fun of you. I mean, look at the people who are uber wealthy right now, and what you see is they've got a target on their back. Everybody in the world wants some of their money. You hear it from a lot of people, from Tupac to Kanye to the list goes on. You weren't with me when I worked so hard to get to this money, so don't expect to be standing there for a handout when I got it. And a lot of people have seen that. They grew up on the streets. They grew up with nothing. They worked hard. They disciplined themselves. They showed up time after time. They did the hard stuff themselves. Not with a whole team of people, but themselves. And now they got it. There's like a ripple effect. There's a wake of people who want to follow them around and claim their success or claim their money or say, I was there when. That's a pretty tough space to be in. But see, the people who make it, the money, the people who make it, the success, the people who make it, the notoriety, the people who make it as great leaders, they have that thing in common. They know that success is hard. And it's not just about creating a TikTok channel where everybody's attention is on you for 90 seconds. Yeah, you could amass a bunch of followers. That doesn't make you a leader. You could get a lot of attention. That doesn't make you a leader. In fact, how many people do we know that have risen to great acclaim? Journalism, music, stand-up comedy, the list goes on and on. They get famous. They get all the notoriety. They get all the eyeballs on them. They get all the money, all the attention. And they wake up one day and they're canceled. How does that happen? I remember Joe Rogan when they were talking about pulling his Spotify account because there was things he was talking about they didn't want him talking about. When I say they, I mean the powers that be that have the money and the influence to say, yeah, just turn him off. We're done listening to him. And around the same time that they were going after Joe Rogan, they went after Dave Chappelle. And the two of them, both top in their game and comedy, both of them were under the pressure of, don't say that, make sure you say this, or we're going to cancel you. Let me tell you another way that people get canceled. People get canceled, leaders who are on the rise, get canceled when they feel like, I've arrived. I'm done. I've got my 200-man team or my company of 500 employees or I'm making 8 figures. And they're convinced that now that they're there, they can stay on this plateau without any other effort. It's not true. Another way they get canceled is when they run afoul of the powers that be. People who have more money, more time, more talent, more expenses, more ability to stand in your way. I remember a movie producer telling me one time, he said, you know, we worked on this play, the actual script for the movie. We worked on it for years and years and years. The screenplay was put together. It was approved. We had everybody on board. We had all the right producers and all the right names. And we even had some good actors, A-list and B-list actors that agreed they would be a part of it. And we were this close to getting our funding. And then a big name movie house came in and they're like, hey, kind of like what you're doing there. The movie house had some different opinions about the content in the movie. They're like, well, you know, we love what you have going on here. We love all the traction and all the attention that you're getting with this. But there are a couple of things in there that, well, we wouldn't publish it that way. But hey, you know what? We'll give you $5 million. And we'll just buy the movie outright. And when it's tweaked, we'll publish it. They spent the $5 million. And according to the producer that I was talking to, that movie vanished into the dust closet. Never was produced. There were other movies that friends of theirs knew about, friends that I've talked to as well, that they put the movie together and a big movie house came along and bought it. And they said, yeah, it's really not worth all that. It's really not as good as we thought it was. But hey, keep the money. And then 4 or 5 years later, a movie almost exactly like it, but with a little different theme. Some new nuances, some ideologies that the original screenplay writer didn't hold. But they served a certain narrative. So another way you can get canceled is if what you have to say is not approved by the powers that be. They'll buy you out. They will buy your fame and your fortune. They got no problem with that, as long as they can hush your ideas. Yeah, success is hard. Success isn't just hard because you got to discipline yourself to get there, but that is one reason. Because see, here's another way that you get canceled. This is probably the most common. And that is, you figure out how to play the game. You figure out how to play the algorithm to get the promotion, to get the raise. If you've ever met someone, as John Maxwell says, we tend to hire people for what they know, Fire them for who they are. If you've ever met someone who's got the job, they've got the title, they've got the position, they've got the leadership, and yet you know the minute the lights are off and nobody's staring at them, they're a mess. They can't keep their own thinking straight. They've got suicidal ideations. They've got anxiety out the wazoo. They've got stress that's overwhelming them. Every relationship around them is falling apart. Nobody really likes them. But when the lights are on and everybody's on them, it's game on. It's game on, and they're a phenomenal leader, and they're getting things done, and they're getting results. And chances are they've got a little leverage on somebody that they're getting to do the work. But see, that area of falling apart when you think nobody's looking, that's a lack of integrity. And here's what it tells me. This is a leader who's managed position, but a leader who has not led their own thoughts. Let me say that again. This is a leader who's managed positions, but not a leader who's led their own thoughts or managed their own thoughts. And so what happens is, when you feel like nobody's looking, you just let your hair out. You let it all go. You do what feels good and comfortable to you. And then you realize that fear of the imposter syndrome, that's my life. That's who I really am. I really am that person that can't cut it. I really am that person that doesn't really know everything they say they know. I mean, if it wasn't for X, Y, and Z, I couldn't even make it here. But I'm not telling anybody that. I'm certainly not telling X, Y, and Z that. I don't need them to know how much I depend on them, because then I wouldn't be the leader in their life. There may be some truth to that, but I can tell you as a leader, as an influencer, sometimes the most powerful thing you have is your own reality, your own awareness, and your transparency. See, one of the challenges we have as leaders is we forget what Brennan Burchard and others have called the tyranny of the urgent. And here's how that little tyrant shows up. We tend to get more of what we focus on. And when we don't focus on the future, when we don't focus on the plan for the way things should be, when we don't focus our emotion and our direction and our behavior toward what's coming, then what happens is we allow the things that are right in our present, that are a little out of alignment, to take over our thought processes. That produces anxiety and stress. Or we find ourselves dealing with the things of the past that we never cleaned up. We should have reconciled those things years ago. We should have brought those things to a resolution. We should have solved that problem 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. See, those are the kinds of things. I brought it up several times since the guy was caught on the kiss cam at a Major League Baseball game with somebody who wasn't his wife. I promise you that notion to go to that game with that woman that day didn't happen that day. No, that was a thought process, a series of behaviors and choices that led to that moment. And great leaders mind their own thoughts. Great leaders take every thought captive and they ask themselves, is that benefiting me? Is that going to help my team? Is that going to be good? And I don't mean they wait until the thought has manifested itself into an action and then become a pattern of behavior. If you're already there and you've got thoughts that run wild and you act on those thoughts that run wild, and then you find yourself compulsively behaving in a way that becomes a pattern, like an addiction, like constantly cheating, like a lack of integrity, when those behaviors begin to manifest themselves to the degree that everybody else can see them, by that point, you're already on a downward spiral. As a leader, you've got to recognize those thoughts when they come into your mind. Well, what if I just cut this corner? What if I just change this? What if I fire that person because they know too much? What if I just move them off to another team to avoid the problem? We see it everywhere. Sexual harassment is probably the biggest one in the corporate world, where two people get too close in a relationship, or one wants a relationship and the other one doesn't. And it's easier to fire the subordinate than it is to clean up your own internal mental mess. Happens in relationships, happens at the home, it happens in our own personal disciplines. I got this little book. It's called A Teenage Rebellion Against Low Expectations. A Teenage Rebellion Against Low Expectations. Foreword is by Chuck Norris. But on page 136, He says, unfortunately, we tend to respond to these small, hard things in not so revolutionary ways. So besides naming 5 reasons small things are hard, we also came up with 5 ways we fail to do small, hard things. See if you can recognize yourself in this. Number 1, procrastination. Now, as you're thinking of the word procrastination, I also want you to think in your mind what we've been talking about here on Leading Leaders podcast for the last probably almost a dozen episodes. And that is that these tiny little phrases, they're tied to the stories in your belief system. They're tied to the way that you live your life. And these phrases express an attitude. It's how I think about how I feel, and how I feel about how I think. And so if you think a certain process on a regular basis and you don't take a hold of that thought and go, is that benefiting me or is it not? Is that helping the people around me or is it not? Then what happens is that thought begins to take root. That belief becomes a belief system. And the phrases that come out of your mouth indicate and architect attitudes. So right here in Do Hard Things, he says this. One of these small things that we have to do that we fail to do is number 1, procrastination. Quote, sure, I'll take care of that eventually, in just a minute, right after oh look, it's time for bed. I see if you've repeated those kind of phrases in your head before, you make excuses for why you haven't done it yet, you're not doing it, you know you should do it, you know it's the right thing to do, but your thinking lets you go down a path that's not helpful. That's an attitude. Number 2, inconsistency. Yeah, I read my Bible, did my homework, finished that task, finished my assignment, turned in the paperwork, whatever it was. In fact, I did it just this morning. Of course, I didn't do it yesterday or the day before, but I did last Tuesday. I think I did. See how this verbal gymnastics, it indicates a thought process that has not been brought under control. Just random thoughts, like drive-bys of thinking. There's no process. There's no end game. There's no, I'm working out this process one step at a time until I get there. I know what I want the future to be, and now I just got to figure out how I'm going to get there. None of that's going on here. This is just tap dancing around excuses. How about this one? Compromise. Quote, I'll do it just this once. One time can't hurt, right? Maybe just one more time, and then I'll stop for good. Okay, just one more time. Those, my friends, those are the words of an addict. That kind of phraseology, that's an addict. That's someone who thinks they have control, but something else is a tyrant in their life. A want, a need, a desire, a good friend gone bad. One of those people in your circle of environment where you think you have great friends, but they're not so great for you. They're just using you. Yeah, that's not good. But that kind of language, that's how I think about how I feel and how I feel about what I think. That's an attitude. An attitude of compromise will destroy you. Absolutely destroy you. Number 4, begrudging. Begrudging. Okay, I'll do it if I have to. I just don't expect me to do it with a decent attitude. Well, there you go. That's an attitude jumping right out there. Again, this is a thought process going on in the minds of many. There are people that are at the highest levels in organizations that feel like I can just get away with this once. Enron? I'll do it, but don't expect me to have a good attitude about it. How many times have you heard that as a leader, as a supervisor? How many times have you thought that yourself? I'm doing this under protest. Just saying. And the last of the 5 is cheating. Quote, look, I clean my room really well. I clean my room really well, at least if you don't look in the closet under the bed or in my dresser or in my laundry hamper. Meaning, I did it, kinda. I did it good enough for government work. I did it as long as you don't look real close with scrutiny. The job is done. It's not perfect, but it's done. Now, I know there are plenty of people out there who hold the philosophy, say yes and figure out how. It's a pretty good energy to believe that you always can, even if you haven't discovered just how just yet. Maybe you've never done this before, but you're willing to try. That's always going to leave a little bit of residue of imperfection. That's always going to leave you in a place where you're like, well, I look back now and I realize I could have done that better. I just didn't know at the time. Angela Mayu says, now I know better, and so I do better. Well, once you've done it, if you tried your very best, that's excellence, not perfection, and you got as close as you could, that's a good place to start. But the more time you spend thinking about that thing, that project, that task, that assignment, and you realize, I could have done better, now it's time for the attitude of excellence to step up and go, any chance I could do that again, because I think I could do a better job at that. I think I could finish that report faster. I think I could get that more accurate in that database. I think I could approach that customer better and actually close the sale at a higher volume. Will you give me a second chance at that? That's the kind of internal thinking that a leader's got to be busy about. And they've got to be thinking on a regular basis. I love the way John Maxwell says it. In fact, right here in my studio in the training room, there's an old chair. I've been lugging this chair around for probably 15 years of our marriage. My wife pretty much hates that chair. But after the first time I heard John Maxwell say, I have a thinking chair, I thought to myself, the number of times I've been in that world famous coffee shop, they've got the big leather armchairs and you just kind of sink down into them, and it almost seems like it absorbs all the other noise in the room, and you can focus on yourself, whether it's with a book or a cup of coffee, and just leave the world for a minute. I love the ones that I've seen at the high-end fancy hotels where the chair literally is like 2 feet above your head and it wraps all the way around. And if you're sitting in that chair having a phone conversation, nobody in the world can hear you and you can't hear anything else. I love those, but I tend to fall asleep in them. But my old chair, I've been lugging that thing around. We finally had to put a cover on it because all the leather was peeling and flaking off. And I guess it's pleather, not leather. It's kind of a cheap substitute. But John Maxwell in one of his books said, I actually have a chair where I think. And on my calendar, I have a time when I think. And I have a process. Now, if you haven't read it yet, it's a little tiny book called, the bigger book is called Thinking for a Change. The little one is called How Successful People Think. Both of them walk through a very basic outline principle of thinking. And one of the things that he mentions in this thinking, I thought it was kind of cute because we live in a small town with a square where there's a lot of people walking around on weekends, and a lot of them take their pets. And sometimes you look at that dog and you're like, is that even a dog? I mean, what is that thing? It's hideous. John says, when you have a new thought, a new idea, something that comes to mind and you're like, wow, I've never heard anybody say that. I've never thought this thought before. Write it down. Write it down in great detail. And then summarize it. And then take that summary out in the public, like that ugly dog on a leash, and see how many people are like, oh my gosh, it's adorable. Oh, that's great. I love that. Or, is that even a dog? Because sometimes you're going to think wonderful ideas are the most wonderful invention in the world. And I've done it. I was about 15 years old when I realized a lot of car crashes hurt the people in the car because the people in the car get closer to the other car. And I thought, what if the seats were mounted to rails? So if the car got hit from behind, the seats moved further away from the back of the car. And if they got hit from the front, they moved further away from the front of the car so you didn't hit the dash of the windshield. And I brought that up to my dad at the time, and I was probably 14 or 15 years old. We're cruising down the highway in Dallas, Texas in his Cadillac, and they had just detailed it. So these leather seats were freshly armor-alled. And at the time, there was no seatbelt law. And so when I said, we should just make the seats move further away from the dashboard so nobody would hit the dashboard, at 65 miles an hour, he slammed on his brakes, and I slid out of that seat like I was on an inflatable slide, smashed my face against the dashboard, and found myself crumpled up on the floor. He got a good laugh out of that. I got back in the seat. He said, see how stupid that idea is? I just took my ugly dog for a walk and somebody pointed it out. And then I said to him, well, but what if we just made everybody wear seatbelts? And he laughed. He said, nobody will ever make me wear seatbelts. Who's laughing now? I bet you're wearing your seatbelt, aren't you? Yeah, it's the law. Click it or ticket. Now, would the physics actually work to put the bumpers and the seats on the same rail so if there was a collision? No, they solved that problem by crumple zones, which I think, from a physics standpoint, has a little bit of logic in it. If two cars collide, they both just squish like sponges. But I really think it was a profit motive. How do I know? Well, have you looked at a new Lexus SUV? There is no bumper. The front half of the car, from the license plate to the windshield, is a crumple zone. And if you hit a bug, you're probably going to spend $1,000 replacing that grill because it's a giant piece of plastic that you can't get anywhere but Lexus. And if you bend that bumper because you run over an armadillo, you're going to spend about $5,000 just trying to make it pretty again. It's not safer necessarily, but it sure does replace a lot of parts. See, those people were thinking. They were thinking. They were thinking, how can I get more money out of you? Because the old marketing thing is true. It's easier to get more money from an existing customer than to get new money from a new customer. It's just the way it works. If they already bought your car and they love it, they'll spend money to fix it and make it pretty again. That's easier than getting a new customer who's never driven that kind of car before. They were thinking. So let me ask you the question, what is it you're thinking about? Are you even thinking at all? Are you walking through your day from the time you walk in the door at work till the time you walk out? Maybe you office at home, but from the time you say game on until the time you say game off, are you processing thought completely at all? Or are you just getting through the day, putting out fires, dealing with past issues that haven't been resolved, trying to reconcile those things that should have been dealt with last week? I read it last Tuesday, I think. Are you sure? Can you put it on your calendar? Could I look at your calendar and go, what day do you think? What time of day do you think? Where do you think? Do you have a place? Is there a commitment that says, I'm going to think about what the positive future could be. I'm going to focus my attention and my energy on that. Now, there's another book that's about twice the size of this that is on my shelf. And honestly, the philosophy of it blows me away with excitement, and the writing of it puts me to sleep. But I'm going to get through it because I've had a lot of conversations with people around it. It's by Dr. Bruce Lipton. It's called The Biology of Belief. And part of what he talks about, and Joe Dispenza was talking about it this morning, Tony Robbins has been talking about it all week in my own personal study time, that the way you think can actually alter your DNA. That'll mess with your head. I mean, in a lot of ways. Zig Ziglar said it 40 years ago. He said, I used to tell my granddaughter to call me fat man, and I never could get below 200 pounds. And when I finally realized that she was informing me that it was okay to be fat, and I was informing her that I was happy being fat, my body responded to that by, well, being fat. And when I stopped saying that, and I told her to stop saying that, my life began to change. How many of us are dealing with stress, high blood pressure, various kinds of diseases? Dr. Caroline Leaf says 78 to 90%. Is that the number? 72 to 98%. That's the number. It's in her book, Who Switched On My Brain. 72 to 98% of all chronic illnesses start with negative thinking. Dr. Daniel Amen calls them ants, automatic negative thoughts. Leaders who don't proactively take their thoughts under control, commit time to analyzing those thoughts and asking, is that serving me or is it not? Do I really believe that, or did I just hear it? Am I coping with problems that should have already been resolved? Am I procrastinating? Am I avoiding? Am I operating in a begrudging way? Is my attitude right? Leaders who don't do that practice on a regular basis are the kind of leaders who will rise to the top. They'll have millions of followers, maybe even millions of dollars in the bank, and one day they'll wake up and realize the patterns of my life are destructive. The thoughts of my life hurt people I care about. I may have made it in the eyes of everyone who wants to look at my bank account and my resume, but in the eyes of those who matter the most, I haven't. John Maxwell says that as well. He said it's one thing to have a reputation. It's another thing to have a legacy, and the difference is Your reputation, your brand, is what other people say about you. Your legacy is what those closest to you say about you. And when those don't match, it's probably because your thinking is a mess. You're going to get more of what you focus on. Pay attention to your thinking. I'm Jay Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your